Shalom. Torah number 8 from the book Keter Shem Tov talks about the very important concept called inter-inclusion. The concept of inter-inclusion says that regarding every two opposite concepts, in a rectified situation, in a rectified state, each element would include, or each thing, each concept would include an element of the other concept within itself. That is called inter-inclusion. So the main example given for inter-inclusion are men and women. Men and women, men are male, women are female. But every man, every male person also has a female element in them, and every woman also has a male element in them. So this is called inter-inclusion. But the Torah starts very interestingly. It starts with a verse from the first book of Kings, which talks about King Solomon, and talks about the negative influence the many wives of Solomon had over him. So this is actually said twice in two ways, one after the other. So we're going to first read the verses from Kings. It's first book of Kings, chapter 11, verses 3 and 4. So verse 3 says that King Solomon had 700 royal wives and 300 concubines. And, everything in the Torah is not just history, it's also something that exists within us. Probably we all have something within us. We have a lot of different parts to our hearts, and they pull us in different directions. So the next part of the verse says that those 1,000 wives, 700 wives, 300 concubines, his wives turned his heart away. Vayatun nashav et libo. They made his heart be inclined in a negative way, or in actually many negative ways. They brought their idol worship rituals into the palace. They weren't properly converted, almost all of them, except Naamah. She was the only one properly converted. And that's why the kingly lineage comes from her. And then the next verse says, in a different way, but repeats the same idea, in his old age, his wives turned away Solomon's heart after other gods. Hitu et levavo acharei Elohim acherim. And he was not wholeheartedly devoted to God as his father David had been. So these are the two verses. The talk and the main idiom they have in common is hatayat halev, the inclining or the turning away of the heart. Vayatu nashav et libo ve'nashav hitu et levavo. So the Baal Shem Tov starts with the second one, nashav hitu levavo. And then the Baal Shem Tov says something very, very beautiful. He says, there is no word in the Torah that does not contain two meanings, both male and female. Every word in Hebrew is both male and female, or at least can be interpreted in a male way or in a female way. This is what the Baal Shem Tov is saying. Very, very incredible idea. Now actually later on, he repeats this idea, but he uses a different verse to, I don't have it here now, but it's very beautiful to see that he also says the same thing. Oh, here it is. So Torah 21 of the same book opens another verse and arrives at the same conclusion from another verse. And if we connect them, the story of Solomon, this story, beautiful things happen. And so the Torah 21 talks about Noach's Ark. Regarding Noach's Ark, we're told Shnaim ish ve'ishto ba'u el hateiva. All the animals came into Noach's Ark, as we all know, in pairs, male and female. Now the word for ark in Hebrew, teiva, is the same word. It's one of the words in Hebrew for word. The word for word, right? So the usual word for word in Hebrew is milah. That's the word we usually use. But another word for word is teiva. Just like we say when we talk about acronyms in Hebrew, we say rashei teivot, the heads or the initial letters of the teivot, of the milim. So actually some Hebrew speakers wouldn't even know that teiva means word, but if you tell them, well, rashei teivot is the heads of the word. So, oh, right. So teiva means both word and ark, as in Noach's ark. So when we spoke about the King Solomon, he says every teiva, every word of the Torah has two meanings. In Torah 21, he also says the same thing. He says teiva is also a word. So what does it mean that the animals came up to Noach's ark, the teiva, in pairs of male and female? He says every word, every Hebrew word, has both a male aspect and a female aspect. The image of the ark with the animals going in pairs, as an ark is like each and every word, there's a pair of male and female coming into the word. The word is impregnated with a male meaning and a female meaning, just like Noach's ark. And now going back to King Solomon, so he says everything in the world contains everything else. Everything in the world contains everything else. This is a very, very deep concept. It's like really saying that the world is like a fractal. The whole concept that the male has a female aspect and so on, and the whole concept of inter-inclusion is like we see in fractal geometry. In fractal geometry, you have a shape, and if you go closer into that shape, you see that shape repeating itself again and again and again in different levels. You have to constantly zoom in to see this. And nature is full of fractals. Every tree, every bush, it repeats the same algorithm on a smaller scale. We see the tree, and then each branch repeats the same algorithm, the same pattern, and it's even repeated again within the leaf, in the subtle tendrils of the leaf. And of course, what's the word for kulvit and cauliflower? Cauliflower has each and every part of the cauliflower looks like one big cauliflower. This is because nature has fractal geometry algorithms embedded within it, and so the Baal Shem Tov says this is also true spiritually. Everything includes everything else. What does this have to do with King Solomon being pulled away by his women? He says we have a choice which direction our heart is pulled. So when the women of the King Solomon's wives are really the feminine aspect of him, and the fact that they turned away his heart meant that they made him, it was all inside him, they made him turn in a certain direction. He could have turned it in the other direction also. And so it's a very short, whenever you have a very short Torah, it can be taken different ways. But what we come out of this is something very amazing, is that we each have a lot of different sides to us. And it's really up to us what we do with them, and how we, lean or change them in a certain direction. Now going back to Noach's ark, there's something very beautiful we can learn out of this. And this really raises a big question. The big question is, what does it mean that if I'm a man, I'm male, and my manhood is something important about me. I also have a big beard. It's very manly, considered. It's something only men have. So on the outside, I'm very male. But if I'm told that on the inside I have both a male and a female aspect, then this raises the question, so how do I balance? Well, it's two kinds of balance, really. How do I balance the male and female aspect within me, and how do I balance the complex mosaic of male and female within my body, which is only male? Actually, the body itself also, there's inter-inclusion within the body as well, because within the body I have both male hormones and female hormones. It's just that the male hormones are more dominant, and I also have a little bit of female hormones. And also anatomically, right? We have men have organs that make no sense for them, like nipples, and they make sense for women. They don't make any sense for men. And there's corresponding things also for women. So there's inter-inclusion anatomically and genetically and hormonally, but still the body is very clearly in an either-or relative to the soul. The body is either male or female, but the soul is far more, it's like, again, the heart contains both male and female aspect. So how do I balance this? So usually when I think about this, I like citing the very, very famous story told in the Talmud about Hillel and Shammai. Hillel and Shammai were, of course, the two great sages. The contemporary state lived in the same generation, but they argued about everything. They read the Torah two completely different ways. And then one day, it is said that they argued, and then a bat kol, and divine echo, was heard in the house of study, and it said, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. These and these, both the words of Hillel and the words of Shammai, are the words of the living God. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. But then it added, ve'halacha kebet Hillel. But halachically, we should go according to Bet Hillel, because we have to make a choice. We live in an either-or world. We can't halachically decide as both Hillel and Shammai. We have to go for one of them. But on a deeper spiritual level, they're both true. So what I say about this is that it's very beautiful to see that there are two vav chibur, right? The word and, the conjugation of two elements, which is in Hebrew is the vav chibur, appears twice in this term. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. That's the first vav chibur, the vav chibur that combines the words of Hillel and the words of Shammai on a spiritual level. That's like, we can say that's the horizontal conjugation, vav. And then we have another kind of conjunction. I think that the word is conjunction, I think, not conjugation. Conjunction. So the first conjunction is the horizontal one, and then, which is elu ve'elu, both these and these are the words of the living God, but that's the words of God, that's up there. And then the second vav, the second conjunction, is ve'halacha kebet Hillel. Now we're descending, we're landing in the world of facts, in the world of deciding what halachically we should do. And now we're going into the either-or sphere. So now if we translate this to our own makeup, our own structure, we can say that we also have a spiritual level and a physical level. And on the spiritual level, each and every one of us is a mosaic of male and female attributes. Elu ve'elu, male and female, they both exist within us. This is the horizontal, more spiritual conjunction. There's a book that was recently published called, I think it was called the Gender Mosaic. It was by an Israeli neuroscientist who's made a lot of headlines because she says there's no such thing as male and female brain, and there's no such thing as men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and it's all one big mistake. Every brain is a unique mosaic of male and female attributes. But she's still saying there are male and female attributes, because there are, and statistically there are. But she's just saying, and that's the true way to understand this research, is not saying there's no such thing as male and female or Mars and Venus. It's just saying that the brain is a very complex. The brain is the best manifestation in the physical reality of inter-inclusion. Each brain is a mosaic. It's a wonderful word, mosaic. Also has to do, it eludes mosaic. The word mosaic can be seen as the mosaic, the windows, the mosaic works of art. But mosaic also means coming from Moses. So we can see the gender mosaic as alluding to Moshe who gave the Torah, and very beautifully, Moshe, the word Moshe, the three letters, Mem, Shin, He, is the acronym, we talked about Rashi Tevot, it's the acronym of Machloket Shammai Hillel, the dispute between Shammai and Hillel. Moshe contained within him both Hillel and Shammai, because he gave the Torah. It's all one. It's all the same Torah. It's Torat Moshe. Both Hillel and Shammai read Torat Moshe, but each one saw something else. But it all existed within Moshe. Moshe included within him. There was an inter-inclusion within Moshe of both Hillel and Shammai, and their machloket, their dispute, both sides. So Moshe is machloket Shammai Hillel, and Moshe is also the root of the English word mosaic. And mosaic, the brain being a mosaic, just like this neuroscientist, her name is Daphne Yoel, wrote, the brain is a mosaic. Absolutely, it's a wonderful thing to say, and it's not anti-essentialist. It just goes to show how essentialism appears in the world. It doesn't appear in the world Anatomically, on an anatomical level, it's genetically, it's absolutely either or. Each person is either male or female, except for a tiny minority that have a genetic deficiency, a genetic problem, a very extremely rare genetic problem in which it's what the Chazal called androgynous. They're neither male nor female. They have XXY chromosomes or XXYY chromosomes. But other than that tiny minority, which are called now intersex people, everyone else is either male or female, absolutely, and it's very binary. But the brain isn't binary. The brain is, it's interesting that the word brain, you can change the letters into binary. Brainy is binary, same letters. But the brain isn't binary. The brain is very much like a mosaic. So the idea again is that elu ve'elu, the first conjunction, the first vav chibur, talks about the higher level of us, which is physically the brain, and spiritually it's the soul or the consciousness that's embedded within the brain. And this is a mosaic of both male and female aspects or properties. But then as we go down to the second conjunction, all this complexity is embodied within a physical body. The brain is also physical, but when we're talking about physical level, we can differentiate the brain from the rest, from gross anatomy. So the anatomy of the body is very clearly either male or female. So again, when we're zooming in, everything will be a fractal. Even in the anatomy, there's a little bit of inter-inclusion, and even in the brain, you can tell male brain from female brains. There are all kinds of ways of knowing, and they're hormonally and so on, they're either male or female. But generally speaking, if you little focus out and blur the picture a little bit, then the brain on the whole is like elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. It's like these and these, both male and female. Harder to tell if it's either male or female because we're so complicated, and every male has a strong female element, and every woman has a strong male element. But this conjunction, this complexity, this mosaic, this Moshe, Machloket Shammai Hillel, is embodied in a body for which it's as if in heaven, before we were born, there was a halachic decree whether you should be either male or female. And I was put into a male body, and my wife was put into a female body, but really, as souls, we have a lot of aspects to us. So, Elu ve'elu, that's the first conjunction. And then ve'halacha kibet Hillel or kibet Shammai, as male or as female. We're either male or female, but emotionally, spiritually, brain-wise, we're a mosaic of both male and female properties. So what does this tell us about how we should conduct ourselves? So the idea goes like this. The idea goes that it's very important to realize that we have this inter-inclusion within us. Therefore, it is absolutely normal and okay for a man to have a certain feminine aspect. Not only is it okay, it's very strange if it doesn't happen. And as I started by saying that inter-inclusion is the hallmark, is the characteristic trait of a rectified state. If people are arguing and they say, I'm absolutely, let's say, right-winged, and I have no idea of how you can think that the words you say, you, my left-wing friend or foe, and I have no inkling as to how you can think those things, and the same goes for you, that you're so left-wing that you can't begin to understand a right-wing person. This is a state of tohu, of chaos. This is a state of this leads to wars. But a rectified state, there's inter-inclusion. The right-wing person would have an inkling, would have an understanding. There's an element, he can see a left-wing person within him that can help him understand and bridge the differences between him and his left-wing friend. The same goes for the other way around. And the same goes for men and women. So the mature man inter-includes a female element. The mature woman would inter-include a male element. Since each person is a unique mosaic, it also means that you can't judge people according to, the different feminine or masculine aspects they portray, because they have to be unique, and there absolutely could be men for whom some of the female elements are more dominant than the male elements within their within their, again, their personality, their psyche, their brain, and so on. However, all this complexity, all this mosaic of properties, of attributes, is embodied and should be embodied in a form and in a conduct of life and in a way that relates to this world, right? V'halacha kebet Hillel, going down to the word of walking, of doing, of deciding, of living. The context, that whole mosaic is embodied within a context that's either or. There's something inescapable about binarism. Every time you make a choice, there's something binary about this. And even if you want to try and make complex choices, then there's still choices. And every choice, there's something binary. And the fact that we inhabit a body that's either male or female means two things. First, it means that within this mosaic that's up here, one part of the mosaic, one aspect, in my case, the male one, is echoed on a physical level to a far greater degree than the other one. I have an intuitive, physical, on the level that we can say like physical energy, or I'm in tune. There's a vibe connecting because I inhabit a male body, even if I don't particularly identify with this maleness for the time being. But the fact that I inhabit this body, and I have inhabited for my entire life, means that there's a deep connection, a deep affinity to the male aspect within me more than to my female aspect. If I feel alienated from my gender, it means that I'm not connected enough, or I'm not in peace enough, or I'm trying to run away from my body. In Western civilization, there's a long tradition, long heritage. In Judaism, it's different, but in Western culture, there's a long tradition of alienation from the body. That Greek philosophers have talked about the body as a tomb, as something that I feel locked up in, and they wished to free their souls from the body. So Socrates spoke this way, and Plato continued this, and then Christianity is even more than that. They wanted their highest ideal was the monastic ideal, in which I try as much as possible, without killing myself, to transcend my own body. So all of modernity and secularization is all about reaffirming the body in this world, but the heritage remains. And part of the results of this heritage is that people feel that they're more connected. They identify more with the mosaic, and sometimes with the element that's the opposite gender of their body. They identify with this to a greater degree than they do regarding their own body, because of this heritage of alienation from the body. But if we want to be truly holistic, and we should say we are not disembodied souls, and we are not just souls that inhabit a body, we are both a body and a soul. That's the second conjunction, the second vav. We have both the male and female element within us, true, absolutely true, and we should embrace this. But the whole picture, the second and more important conjunction, the second half, ve'alacha kebet Hillel, means that this complex mosaic is situated, inhabits a body that's only male, that's either male or female. So I usually make this joke that a lot of people today say I'm non-binary. The whole idea of binary is a myth. I don't like the binary, and it's better to be non-binary. And I say, this distinction you're making between binary thinking and non-binary thinking, you say binary thinking is bad because it's so simplistic and it's so traditional, it's old-fashioned, but non-binary thinking, that's so advanced and that's so wonderful, then that's very binary of you. That's too binary. Dividing between binary thinking and non-binary thinking, it's so binary. If you really want to be non-binary, you have to include both the non-binary thinking, elu ve'elu mosaic, and the binary thinking also, which is ve'halacha kebet Hillel. So that's being truly non-binary. Truly non-binary would include also the binary, because pushing away the binary thinking and saying, well, I dislike the fact that I have to be either male or female, and it's so like a caricature, it's so stereotypical, the characterizations, the essentialist characterizations of men and women, I don't want to abide by that at all. But it's part of you. If you want to be truly non-binary, you have to acknowledge and embrace the fact that as complex a being as you are, and as fluid as you may be, or as a complex mosaic as you may feel, you inhabit a binary world, and that means you inhabit a body that's either male or female. If you're intersex, that's different. Then you're really in a unique place. But if you're like the rest 99.999% of us, then you're either male or female, and embracing that is part of being a whole person. So again, the coming to terms with all of this is saying that we should absolutely include and embrace within us the opposite gender elements that exist within us. It's very important. But it's also important to put it in the wider context of our bodies and our realities. And that means that, as, for example, talking about me as a man, I have both the opportunity and the obligation to be connected to my body and what that entails. So the opportunity is that I have an opportunity in this lifetime. Maybe next life I will be a woman. Maybe in the previous life I was a woman. But now I'm a man. And I have the opportunity to connect to the male aspect of my personality on a physical level. That's more energetic, that's more direct, that's more, I experience it directly. I also experience my female elements, but not as much as women. So it's an opportunity to fully identify with maleness to a greater extent than I identify with femaleness, although I definitely want my female aspect as well. And it's obligation because as a man, I'm obligated to do some things. I'm physically stronger than women. That requires me to do some things women are not supposed to do, like men going to the army or being fighters and being all kinds of risky jobs, doing all kinds of risky jobs, which they need to be doing because they're stronger and they're more capable of doing it. And if it's women, it's having babies, giving birth. That's a certain, well, it's not obligation in the sense I want to make it, and I want to coerce things, but it's a kind of obligation in the sense that there's some things that only I can do. I mean, only the particular sex that I belong to can do, and if I want to contribute something to the world, and I want to contribute something not just as a person generally, but also as a man or a woman, then there are all kinds of things that, whether it's emotional properties or intellectual properties or ways of looking at the world or ways of identifying or seeing a male perspective or female perspective, that I have this ability to do. So so now, going back to Noach's Ark, we see something very beautiful. We see that Noach's Ark is the image. We said it's like a word, and the word is even the words in the language. They contain a So to sum this part of the shiur, we are complex creatures, but this complexity is twofold. The one level of the complexity is that we contain both male and female elements, and the other part of this complexity is that we're also not so complex. We're also either male or female. And fully embracing ourselves and understanding who we are and the full nature of the fractal, of the human fractal, means embracing and accepting both these elements of us. It's wonderful, and it's not just okay, it's more than okay, it's the way it should be. Mature beings are complex mosaics of male and female elements, and they're also unique mosaics, so that each and every one has his own, different tendencies. However, we are also situated within a body, within a situation in which we're either male or female, and it can't really be changed. Some people think it can be changed. It can only be changed cosmetically or in terms of appearance. A little bit on the hormone level, changes a little bit of how you feel, but it doesn't change neither your anatomy nor your genetics. And the fact is, we are in this lifetime, we're in this one body, and And embracing that and coming to terms with that is a very important part of an aspect of this whole inter-inclusion idea. If we talked about King Solomon that has both these elements to him, but then he can decide how to turn his heart, that the power of choice is really the power of, that's really the question of whether I choose to identify with my body. Again, Solomon was male, but he had a female aspect within him. In this case, we're talking about a negative female aspect, but there's also a positive female aspect. But in this case, we're talking about a negative feminine influence. So in this case, it was up to him. He chose to follow that element and follow it in a negative way. Why am I saying there's also a positive female element? That's also present in King Solomon's story, because one of the most important verses that in Chassidut alludes to the rise of femininity and femininity influencing masculinity is called Eshet Chayil Ateret Ba'ala. And another verse written by King Solomon, and another verse is Ba'atara she'itra lo imo beyom chatunato, the crown that was given to Solomon by his mother on his wedding day. The crown that was given to King Solomon by his mother is an allusion, is a metaphor for the feminine crown, which is the positive feminine aspect of the male that's above his head and that he needs to be inspired by. So King Solomon also had this positive feminine element that came from his mother, from Bathsheba, who gave him, she sort of donned the crown on his head and gave him this feminine positive crown. But there's also the negative feminine aspect, that's his many wives. So it was the fact that the Baal Shem Tov is telling us here that we have everything, but we are the mosaic. We kalul ma'akol. Every created thing is inter-included, made up of everything else. But it's the choice is given to you how to lean, how to direct yourself. So King Solomon could have chosen to listen to the masculine aspect of him and also to the positive feminine. If he would have listened to his mother, he wouldn't have married so many women. But he didn't. He chose to listen to the women, and then that's why he deteriorated and he let idol worship, or he allowed idol worship to be practiced in his palace. And that's why his kingdom was split in the next generation. Next generation, King Solomon had the greatest era of peace. There was neither battles on the outside nor internal enemies. It was the greatest time. But the next generation, this wonderful kingdom, split into two kingdoms, Judea and Israel. And it was all really a reflection of a kind of inner split within Solomon himself. There are many, many ways to look at this inner split, but one of the ways to look at this inner split was the split between male and female, which he wasn't able to bridge properly because he didn't properly identify with the male aspect of him. You can say, well, someone with 1,000 wives, he knows he's a man. He's very much connected to his masculinity. Wrong. He's not. The fact that he's running around from one woman to the other, that is in itself a result of succumbing to the negative feminine element within him, which is pulling him towards this woman. He doesn't have his own center. If he would have had his own center, if he would have been truly connected to his masculinity, he would have focused on one wife and gone deeper in his relationship with her. And that would have created a balanced inter-inclusion, but he didn't do this. So again, we have a choice. We have both elements. We have a choice whether we identify and embrace our physical sex, our gender, or we don't. We can go either way. Going back to Noah's Ark, the second verse that the Baal Shem Tov used to convey the same idea, we see something very beautiful going on over there as well. We can see that just after it says that the animals entered, actually a little bit before it says that the animals came in to the ark, it says, just before, it says, enter the ark, you and your sons, and then your wife and your sons' wives. And then the next verse says, and out of all the animals, bring two, male and female. So this is something very beautiful for us. It's well known and it's Rashi says this, when the Noach and his family come into the ark, then Hashem tells them, you come in with your sons, and then your wife and your sons' wives. Separation between male and female. Don't mix the male and female together. The males go in first, and then the females go in, the women go in, and there's no why. So the usual interpretation is that because this is a time of harsh judgment, the world is being flooded, it's not a time to be intimate. When there's terrible things happening in the world, you can't, a lot of people are dying. We're not in that state, by the way, corona-wise. But if something like this happens, and it's really terrible, and it's not a time to be intimate. So but when the flood is over, the deluge is over, and they come out, then Hashem is telling them, come out of the ark, you and your wife, and your sons' wives. So, a beautiful, amazing thing. When you go into the ark, you need to go in separate. The animals come in together, but you come in separate. And then when you come out of the ark, you come out with you and your wife and your sons' wives. They're instead of being like this, they're like this. They're intertwined, each one with his wife. So one way of interpreting this in a beautiful way is saying, in order to truly work on inter-inclusion, in order to make use of the fact that we are inter-included, and also as the generations progress in our generation, the whole concept of inter-inclusion is increasing, because we're seeing that people are sick and tired of stereotypical differentiations, essentialist differentiations to masculinity and femininity. A lot of people are saying, well, it's far more complex. The brain is a mosaic. Mars, Venus, it doesn't convey the complexity within us. And it's true. But in order to do this properly, the Noah's Ark gives us a kind of formula, it guides us in the right direction. When you go into the Ark, when you go into the Word, when you're building yourself, the first stage is differentiation. Male and female separate. And you have to ask yourself, what am I? I'm either male or female. And that means that I have to, building myself properly from the bottom up, I first need to identify with my own sex and gender. I have to realize that I was put in this particular body. It obligates me and it connects me to this particular gender more than to the other gender. And I have to embrace this, I identify with this, and I have to listen to this, and I have to see we're talking about the Torah, what the Torah tells me as a man that I should do, as opposed to what it tells women they should do. And this is the first level. And then the second level is when you're coming out of the ark, going back into the world, and a more mature, right, or 40 days later, a more mature level is now you and your wife and your sons wives. This is a metaphor or an image, an illustration of inter-inclusion. That now you can be more connected with your wife, that is your feminine side, and your sons with their feminine side, and now it's all together. And I think a beautiful way of conveying this is when we're asking, why is it that so many people today are so confused gender-wise, and they say, well, I'm neither male nor female, or they don't identify with any of these concepts. And then my usual, and the way I understand this is that it's like what happens when the time is ripe for inter-inclusion, but you rush it. If you rush it, if you run towards inter-inclusion without going through the first phase, the phase of differentiation, separation, and identifying with your maleness or with the either-or level, right? Because we spoke before that on the higher level there's inter-inclusion, there's a mosaic. On the lower level it's either-or. But when we're building ourselves from the bottom up. So it's first either-or and then inter-inclusion, just like we see in Noah's Ark. So if we're skipping the first stage and we're jumping to the stage of inter-inclusion, what happens is that it's not inter-inclusion, it's all being jumbled up. And a metaphor for this would be if you use watercolor. If you use watercolor and you want to create beautiful harmonical combinations of different shades of different colors, then you have to take your time, because if you put a stroke of one color and then you wet another color, you want it to combine beautifully, but you don't wait for the first color to dry, it's all going to be muddled, and it's going to just end up brown. And you're not going to have any colors, any harmony. And if you have to wait for one brush stroke to dry, if you want to add another brush stroke that's a different color and you want them to combine in an interesting way, in a rich way, that each one has its own color but they could create something else, you have to either wait or you have to leave a little space between them. Either way, you have to go through differentiation, whether it's over time that you wait for one stain to dry, or it's in space that you leave a hair stroke of space between them, that they don't get muddled up. And if you make this differentiation, right, coming into the arc as male and female separate, then you can come out of the arc in a proper state of inter-inclusion. So this is our class for today, and may we all use this time we're giving a lot of time to really meditate and think more about ourselves and our lives and who we are and what we are, and may we all use this time in a way that we can find the proper whole balance, both within the female-male aspects of us and between this whole complex structure of our personality and our bodies and our maleness or femaleness. So thank you very much, and I will see you next time.